Okay, well, welcome to Black History Conversations. We're well into season 10 now, and I've got a good crowd of folks join me this session. So we're going to just review what we're going to be covering, and then we'll get on with our session. So just to say that we've had an opportunity to hear from Rosemary Caldicott to talk about her research on the devastating voyage of the Welsh slaver Captain Phillips and his enslaved captives. So just try and put this on full screen for you. And in a moment, I'm just going to go through and be talking about an update on the voice referendum in Australia. And then we're also going to be exploring what's happening with the Black History Month activities across UK, so folks can join in then. So I'd like to begin, because I'm in Australia at the moment and it's the middle of the night, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which this session's being led today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And if I didn't introduce myself earlier, I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International. Now, we've looked at different ways to try and recognise exactly what it is that we're about, and I've written this week. I acknowledge that there are still people around the world today who do not understand the implications of the actions taken by our European ancestors. I pledge to endeavour to try and help create better and more honest understanding of the injustices of the actions of these European invaders as perpetuators of abuse to so many over such an extended time. And I also pledge to make an effort to destabilise so many peoples and nations around the world in the centuries of colonialisation. So hopefully that explains the situation there. I'm just checking. I'm just going to mute you, Ivor, so that's all okay. All right then. So, and the reason why I came up with that statement this time was because I'd been researching the research that Rosemary Caldicott has been doing on the devastating voyage of Captain Thomas Phillips. He was a Welsh slaver and his enslaved captives. So it was fascinating to hear of the challenges and issues that Rosemary has got found in the town of Brecon, the hometown of Captain Thomas Phillips. So thank you very much indeed, Rosemary, for sharing that. And we look forward at some future time to hearing more about the Bristol Radical History Group and the stories of Bristol. So this is what Rosemary was saying, was that this unbelievably, considering that 2007 was the recognition of the abolition of the Transatlantic Slave Trade Act. And I would have thought that anyone who was a councillor or had any public position would have known well that in 2007 that we needed to honestly recognise our role as Britons in the transatlantic slave trade, and then to discover that in 2009 there was an idea about erecting a plaque to Captain Thomas Phillips because he was a slave trade captain, and it just seems to completely and obscenely miss the point. And so a plaque was put up in Brecon. And we've been hearing about how the plaque eventually came down at the same time as the statue of Colston in Bristol, and looking at what might have happened. So I did a little bit of research and I found that there's information in the press shared there with the councillors all looking very pleased and happy with themselves on the occasion of putting this plaque up in the first place. Goodness gracious me. And then here again, another article or a letter from Rosemary to the local press pointing out that it's a totally inappropriate recognition. So thanks again, Rosemary, for telling us more about that. I did a bit more research and I found a few excerpts from his journal where he was quite honest about how he and other English traders branded and shackled slaves in the early stages of the Middle Passage, and provided some rare reflections on how Europeans and Africans perceive colour difference, and created the emerging concepts of race and racism. But these are things which, if you want to research yourself, there's plenty of information out there. Rosemary told us about the ship as well, how it left England for the present day Benin on the West African coast. I think that's the right area, wherever I got this from, and then filled his ship to sail to Barbados, but only 372. This is the figures that I've got here. I'm not sure if they're the same as you presented, Rosemary, but they really, really damaging tragedy. And again, here another quote. I was fascinated by this because he realised the sort of social activity that went on in order to discuss with the African people that they were trading with, and how this all worked. Just amazing detail and recorded there, and the different people that he was working with on that journey, and then obviously having to deal with interpreters, but also assuring him how this is with the king, how great the affection of our masters, the Royal African country of England, bore to him for his civility and fair and just dealings with their captains, because there were other places that they'd rejected. But that's really interesting because now King Charles III is exploring and investigating ways that the royal family might have any sort of links with the slave trade. I think it's a bit obvious if you've got a company called the Royal Africa Company. So and the detail there, and obviously it is referring back to the royal family who were the who led on this whole issue. Right, so he talks a little bit more then, and how he's going to relate to the masters, the Royal Africa Company again, when they came back to England. So very much this story was a story which was through the involvement of the Royal Africa Country. Okay then, so I've whizzed through that a little bit quickly, and apologise if I've not got quite all of the things in the right order, but forgive me, it's the middle of the night here. Okay, so we're just going to now look at something that I've spent quite some time on, but I won't go into all of the detail I've got, and that is an update on the voice referendum in Australia. This was the vision, you're the voice. The Aboriginal people of Australia asked the rest of us, the vast majority, to join them as they walked forward for a more positive future for Australia. This was the vision of the Uluru Statement. At the moment, listening to the news is excruciating because a referendum was called to enable this vision to happen, the vision of the Uluru Statement of the Heart, and the rest of us Australians were asked to include the voice of the First Peoples, the Aboriginal people, in the Constitution of Australia. And when you hear what is being said about it by the No campaign, it's just tragic. Okay, so it was to be an advisory body that gives the First Nations Australians a say on matters that directly affect them. So this is what the Aboriginal people wanted after they'd prepared the Uluru Statement of the Heart. The people who support the voice, 83% of First Nations people support the voice because they know it'll make a difference on the ground. And why? Because the voice will deliver better information, better government decisions, less waste and improved outcomes. Now, as you can see, I've been doing a lot of cutting and pasting because there's an awful lot of information online about this at the moment. So if you want anything. So the Uluru Statement from the Heart, the big document behind is the statement, signed statement, and you can view that if you go to ulurustatement.org and find out more about the statement and view it there. So there it is. It's very difficult to read, and I hadn't actually read it before. So what I've done is that found the text of it to say what the First Nations people of Australia said that they wanted when they gathered in 2017 at the National Constitutional Convention. They came from all points of the southern sky and made this statement from the heart. This is what they said. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent islands. They possessed it and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did according to the reckoning of our culture from the creation, according to the common law from time immemorial, according to science more than 60,000 years ago. So this is written in the voice of the first Australians, the Aboriginal people of Australia. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion, the ancestral tie between the land or Mother Nature and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are born therefrom remain attached thereto and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It was never ceded or extinguished and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That peoples possessed a land for 60 millennia and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years. With substantive and constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Very, very well thought through document. Proportionately, we're the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not innately criminal people. Our children are alienated from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them, and our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be the hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of the problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our own destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in the two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of the First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise the process of agreement making between the governments and the First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967, we were counted. In 1917, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. This is incredibly profound, the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And then the politicians worked out how to create it into a referendum when we had a new Labour government. And Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, in his first statements to the country, said that he would work with the first Australians and ensure that they had a voice to Parliament. So that's just to introduce that whole subject. Now, I live here for some of the time, but ended up living here for almost 4 years during COVID. I come back and forth to see my family. And so I've had an opportunity to hear an awful lot about this. We have our own even TV channel just devoted to First Nation stories. So there's a lot going on. But what's happening at the moment is extremely distressing. And it's really, really difficult to hear what's being said, and realizing the challenges that we had in Britain with our referendum, heaven forbid, and to see this country going along a line which is almost unbelievable at the moment. We've got another week. I think it's the 14th, the actual referendum. I think it's on the Saturday of next week, but voting's already started. Right, so just to explain a bit, and I won't go on at too much length, but it's something that I felt I knew so little about. I didn't know there was a White Australia policy. I'd never heard of that. I'd never come across my research into history. So we'll see how well I can explain to you. The reason that I haven't got a first Australian colleague to be with me is it's 1:45 in the morning, and most sensible people in Australia are in bed at this time. So, as part of the Australian government's commitment to the implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, the referendum is going to be next Saturday. So Australians will be asked whether to change the constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. If you've never heard of the Torres Strait Islands before, they're to the north of Australia. And in order to talk about all the people who were here before the European invasions of the current area that is legally Australia, it includes the Torres Straits, and Torres Strait Islanders don't consider themselves to be Aboriginal. They're called Torres Strait Islanders, so that's just the way it is. Referendum question then. So voters will be asked to vote yes or no on a single question. The question on the ballot paper will be a proposed law to alter the constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration? And you have to write in the little box yes, or you write in the little box no. So this is what the ballot paper looks like. It looks like this, but in order to read it, I made it bigger here. Write yes or no. Do you approve the proposed alteration? Write yes or no. You can practice on the screen as well. However, so concerned are people that 352 historians from all over Australia have added their signatures to an open letter. This happened today, I think, which celebrates the potential history-changing moment brought about by a yes vote at the upcoming referendum. When the referendum was mooted, the yes vote was thought of as being the obvious answer. But unfortunately, the opposition party took up to campaign for a no vote, and suddenly we had a conflict. People have said that there should have been a bilateral agreement between the two political parties before the referendum was set up. But once it was set up, the new leader of the opposition has taken it as his personal campaign with an interesting slogan about if you don't know, vote no. And unfortunately, a lot of people in Australia are extremely ignorant about the history of the country and ignorant about what this actually means. And it's quite difficult to get your head around it. So that's sort of understandable. So it also says we believe that this history is made every day, that history is made every day by everyday people joining together to contest past wrongs and trying to put things right. That's an interesting letter. Right, quick history of Australia. That's what Australia might look like if you were looking at it from somewhere else. But strangely enough, when Captain Cook came here, it looked like that, empty, as if there were no people here. And he claimed the eastern coast in 1770. There's this painting of Captain Cook and some of his cronies. I think there's one thing missing, and that is any local people. But it doesn't actually look as if it's a painting of a local place. This is what Australia looks like to us Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. It looks like a continent with lots and lots of different groups of people, different nations, different language speaking groups. It's a huge, huge continent. It's like the whole of Europe, a bit bigger. So no wonder there are so many different communities and countries. So there certainly were people here, but there was never any treaties negotiated with any of the people. Now, you notice that Australia has a lot of straight line borders, like African countries have, imposed by the British and other Europeans. So we started off with just New South Wales, big line down the middle. Then we had New Holland on the west side, but then that got changed to Western Australia. It did go through, it's called Swan River or something at one stage. And then we got divided up a bit more, and eventually we got to the states that we've got currently. We also have a small area in New South Wales where this little black dot is, and that's called the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory. Because we have to have our government buildings in a place that isn't in any of the states. So it's a special little area. Okay, so the Constitution came into effect in 1901, and that established the Commonwealth of Australia. So here in Australia, they talk about the Commonwealth, this, that, and the other. And then there's the British Commonwealth, which is different. So the Constitution is a living document, continues to shape Australia, but notoriously difficult to change, and it can only be changed by referendum. So only 8 changes out of 44 that have been put forward through referendums have been agreed to. So that gives you an indication of the challenge that we're against anyway. The referendum, if it's passed, only passed if it's approved by a majority of voters in a majority of states by the majority of voters across the nation. So it's all those things it has to meet, known as a durable majority, and territory voters, that's the ACT, are only counted in the national majority. Right, okay then. So in Victoria, which is where I am, and I'm not going to read out all of this, they're already working towards creating a treaty between the other peoples who've come in to live and or were born here but have heritage elsewhere in the world, a treaty between those people and the Aboriginal people who still live in our state, the state of Victoria. And the devastation of those peoples was just terrible. Then we need to think about another element of this history, quick history of Australia, and that's white Australia. The Australian government actively enforced the White Australia policy, and British migration was favoured, and there was all kinds of shenanigans went on with the dictation test, because you could choose, the people who were giving the test could choose the language that the person had to had to do the test in. So that was a good way of keeping Chinese people out and other Asian people. And we now have an immigration museum which tells all these stories in a great deal of detail. It's a fascinating place to visit. So as a result, the non-white people, including Australia's Indigenous population, only made up about 2% of the overall population in the 1940s, which just indicates how many Europeans came over here to Australia. And we've got people from every European country you can imagine living here and celebrating life here and getting on with life here. But the proportion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders is really very small. So when we had a referendum in 67 to change the 2 sections of the Constitution in relation to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, 90.77% of Australians voted yes. Right the wrongs, right yes, the 1967. Unbelievable, you had to get to 1967 and be giving people the rights to be people in their own country. So this explains a little bit more about multicultural Australia. And it wasn't, though, until 1973 that the government definitively renounced the White Australia policy. And now, as we say, we've got migrants from over 200 different countries celebrated in different ways, particularly in the cities. But the campaigns carry on. The Aboriginal Embassy set itself up outside the Parliament House in Canberra in 1972, and it's still there now. It's a permanent tent embassy on the lawns outside the old Parliament House. There's a Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, and the campaigns have gone on and on. And the Mabo decision in 1992 rejected the doctrine that Australia was terra nullius at the time of European settlement, and that Native Title Act made a big, big difference. Lots of Australians who want to know about these things watch and find out from NITV, but lots of people, I'm sure, don't bother. There's Mabo. And that was a very successful case. Now, this referendum, I was horrified this evening earlier when I was putting all these slides together to find the referendum pamphlet, the yes or no. Horrified because it gives so much opportunity for people to become utterly, utterly confused, which is what appears to be happening. So the proposed law is to alter the Constitution to recognise First Peoples by establishing a voice to Parliament. So in the yes vote, about recognition, listening, better results, it's a change that only you can happen. I want a constitutional recognition through a voice. What the voice is, why we need the voice, you can look up on the internet. But you know, the life expectancy is shorter, worse rates of disease and infant mortality, twice the rate of suicide, fewer opportunities for education and training. And it doesn't say here about the incarceration, but that is far, far too high. And how it'll work. And there are some key facts. And then 8 more reasons to vote yes. And then there's an equal amount of information about why you might want to vote no. And the slogan, if you don't know, vote no, is extraordinarily powerful, I think. And it's going to be a really rough ride if nobody knows what'll happen if the vote goes to no. It's risky. This is what the people who say vote no say. It'll be risky if we get this going through, and there was a voice of the First Nations people to our Parliament. They say There are a lot of things that are unknown. They say it'll be divisive. They say it'll be permanent. And they then go on to give 10 reasons to vote no. But try and be positive. Reasons to vote yes. There are lots of good reasons. Recognition, listening, better results, protecting. Oh, reasons for voting no. Risky, divisive, permanent. If you don't know, vote no. Pamphlets are going out that are unauthorised, that are saying a whole load of false claims, conspiracy theories, and they've been distributed all across Australia. So people are worrying that they might have to have an Aboriginal tax. There might be things to do with the United Nations being involved. It's just going, it's quite out of hand. The news is extremely distressing. So here from the good old BBC, I looked up what the BBC thought the current issues were here, and certainly the increase in hostility and racism is becoming far too overt. People are really distressed by comments that they're receiving in the street even. If this referendum fails, then there's no mandate for a referendum on something else. So it's the debate's laced with hate speech and disinformation. And to hear some of the commentaries on TV are just appalling. But these wonderful ladies here, they're ladies from my community here, and they've worked with me on some of the events that we've put on out here. They're a wonderful group. Okay, right. So that was the Australian referendum, which by next week will be upon us. Garrick.
Thanks very much for that, Liz. Just for your information, last week on the Global African Congress platform, this subject came up about the referendum for the native Australians, or the Aboriginal people. And what they were trying to do is to make some sort of connection with somebody in Australia. I did point out a different time zone is a big issue because of the time we meet. And they were looking at other means of getting information, maybe from connection here in the UK, because this is a very, very important issue. We haven't got much power over this issue because we're not living in Australia. And, you know, we may have a view, but that's about it. Couple of things that came out in the conversation. It's all right offering a referendum, yes, wonderful. But again, as you mentioned, we must get the numbers for it to go through. So they could say, well, we offer a referendum, but, you know, we didn't get the numbers. So everything remained the same, okay? And then the no vote, you know, which you said is very powerful because people are very ignorant about these issues. So, you know, if you remember the Brexit slogan, you know, that Johnson used, yeah, and these single line, you know, Brexit oven ready, it's ready to go, basically. What I was just wondering, is there anything that people from outside of Australia, us in the UK and other places, is there anything that we can do?
I think my straightforward answer to that, Garrick, would be that the British have probably had too much to do with what's going on in Australia. And on an issue like this, the voice of anybody from outside Australia, I wouldn't, and I will say that I support the yes vote I don't have a vote. I'm a resident, not a citizen.
Mm.
Because it's the business of these people now. Australia has an Australian government. Australia had a British government until 1901. And it's the British who caused all the problems in the first place. So it's difficult. I think all I would ask is for people to take an interest and perhaps consider learning more about First Australians' culture and heritage and respect them. And I would have hoped that you would have watched Australia under its new Labour government moving forward to be very much more positive in and perhaps even with thinking in its way of resolving the problems. But the way they've gone about it has thrown up a whole lot of other very, very difficult issues. So I think it's watch and wait. I don't think there's anything else anybody outside of Australia can do at the moment, and I don't think there's a lot. Once this bandwagon's rolled, you can't stop it.
Yeah.
Rosemary.
Thank you, Liz. So I'm from where I'm sitting. So it's become a culture war, although it's been a culture war obviously for decades. But the opposition leader has turned it into a major culture war. Is this correct? And my second question is, so the referendum is 50-50. Is that correct, like it was for Brexit? Instead of being 60-40, for example?
I would imagine it's 50-50. They talk about majority, but it's this three-way majority. It has to be a majority in every state and a majority overall, and some other element in it that fixes it. It sounds to me it's almost like it's set up not to be successful, because some states it's less likely. In Victoria, for example, where I live, where they've been talking for years about and getting on with a treaty with the First Australians. That's the only state that's doing it. Some of the other states, like Western Australia, are not so progressive in their thoughts about engaging with Aboriginal people. So it's kind of complicated. I think with the culture war thing, the leader of the opposition is a person with a very, to me, very odd personality. He's very determined to just undermine anything that the other side, the Labour Party, say, and he will just say anything to go against it. And he also has a track record of not supporting initiatives that are being put forward to benefit First Australians. So it's a very, very difficult situation. And there are also plenty of other people, both from the multicultural communities and also from Aboriginal community individuals who want to make their voice heard, and they are speaking against the yes vote. So there's an extremely complex picture being presented to people. It's not really a culture war, because the culture of the First Australians is so very, very significantly different from European cultures or Asian cultures or wherever else people come from in the world. We've all got our different cultural activities. It's not a conflict against the culture. I think people recognize and accept but don't understand it's an extremely different culture. Their whole way of thinking about the world, speaking about the world, relating to the world, relating to one another, that they're so very, very different to the way that Europeans or perhaps people from the Asian continent might, the way that their cultures go. It's just very different, very interesting. But the majority, the vast majority of people on this continent, 97%, I think it is, aren't Indigenous people. So we outweigh the numbers of Indigenous Australians by an enormous amount. And there are reasons for that. It's just very difficult, and because their culture is very different, they'll often keep themselves. But then there's this whole issue of the fact that there are a great many mixed people who've got European and Aboriginal heritage because of the strategy that the British government took and led the country down the route of stealing the children, taking the Aboriginal children from their parents and bringing them up in missions. And then they lost their links with culture, with country, and then they went to live in the white communities and married into the white communities. So what's happening now, and I've seen it in the years I've been coming here, is that people refer to themselves by their cultural background. So if it was me, I'd be saying, you know, I'm Liz Millman, I'm a Welsh English woman, because I'd refer to my father's background and my mother's background. So you get people who introduce themselves as Wurundjeri and something else and something else and something else, and they explain that. And now on the television, if a reporter's speaking, they won't say, oh, it's Frida Smith from Queensland. She'll say it's Frida Smith from the Eregendi land in Queensland. And they refer to or they just call the country the name of the place, the name of the, it's difficult to say. Aboriginal people call the land the country. So they say, I'm from Wurundjeri country or whatever. So it's complex, and I'm not really looking forward to the next week and hearing what's going to happen. So it's a worry. Okay. Right. I'm not going to really take too much more of your time, but just to say if there's anything that anybody wants to add about Black History Month activities. So Black History Month, over to you. Things that good one here from Harvard University, just to let you know, we hear about things going on all over the world. This one's in London on the 17th of October. Black History's Warning to the World. This sounds like a good one. There. Where are we? Oh Lord, I saw this about.
Oh God.
Joys
oh please, no, I apologize. I apologize.
Sorry?
I said I apologize for that woman's statement to the rest of the world.
Unbelievable. Presentation here went on this last week about this was the Equinino Society. Sorry, and there's a whole long list of things here that was shared with me by a friend in Leeds, and we had the author, I can't remember her first name, Jim Beery. She came to talk to us about her book on Windrush, and she's now got one about the Black Airmen. So yes, different things there. And just to let you know that tomorrow we've got the North Wales Jamaica Society meeting, which will be at 9 o'clock in Jamaica and at 3 o'clock in the UK. It's one of those weeks with lots of meetings. Just to say that they're going to be talking about our delegation going to Penrhyn Castle, our Jamaica Day, a special service we had to recognise Enrico and Mary Stennett. And also we'll be talking about the Tithe Project, learning experiences from links with Wales. This was Denby High School, Geoffrey Douglas, the acting principal there from Denby High School in Jamaica, and this is Glenn Williams, the principal of the Denby High School in North Wales. So we're hoping that we're going to get them doing some links and things. And then next Thursday we'll be back again with the group from Pennants, working on the projects that we've got going there, looking at reparation with the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation funds, finding out more about Percy Junior. And that's it. Right. Okay. Thank you very much for coping with all that lot of information. Great deal today. Okay. Anything else anybody wants to add?
Liz, just to say that today's session, both the presentation from Rosemary and your presentation about Australia has been very, very informative. These type of information, and I'm glad you recorded this, because other people were able to look at this. I can make reference to where they can find the recording and actually listen again, which is great. Just to say that for Black History Month, we're giving focus to our sisters, the ladies or the women who've made a positive contribution to society, both from the UK and across the United States. There's a special magazine that's been featured, which you can purchase. It is promoted on the Black History Month website. You can purchase for $3.95. I have purchased a few copies of it. Inside that magazine, there's a couple of work colleagues that I worked with over the years, back in the 70s. There's a whole section that's dedicated to Olive Morris from Brixton, when we campaigned for better housing in Lambeth. And her family, Mayor Morris, is featured in the magazine and talk about the work that Olive Morris did. I said this before, those were the days when I was actively engaged with the Black Power movement then, with Darcus Howe and the dub poet and a few other people. And back in those days, we were fighting against the system. And as a dub poet would say, we're fighting against Babylon. And, we're almost gone a full circle, and we're still fighting against Babylon, and Babylon being the institution and the police, etc. So if people can get that magazine, it's well worth getting. It's an additional resource to just the website. You can order your personal copy, and the features in that magazine is really very good.
Excellent. That's really good to know then, Gary. Be good to get a copy of that.
Yes, just wanted to ask, what we're doing next week? What did you say?
I'm just waiting for a couple of confirmations to get the.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, I don't know. I did mention to you when we spoke on the phone, but I did a Black History presentation yesterday to a local library, and the beauty of the library, they want to close it, but volunteers have been manning it, and it's a lovely little library. And yesterday was 100 years since it opened as a church, so I think it was very fitting yesterday.
You tell us about that, and you tell us about what you've been doing for Black History Month and during the year in Northampton. Is that too short notice for you?
What, next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do. Please spell my name right.
Okay.
Put an E before the Y in Gully. Thank you.
Right, okay. Carol, you haven't really had a chance to join us and to say anything, make a contribution. Is there anything that you'd like to come in with?
No, I follow the Bristol Radical History group, and that's how I found this link. And I've been to a talk by Rosemary on the women who went to sea as men, and so I've come in through that sort of door. So I live near Bristol, and I've gone to. They're having a festival this month, aren't you? Or there's a weekend, I think, coming up. So I've just link into what I want to do or listen to from that.
Carol, I thought I recognised your face. I did think I thought.
Frizzy hair, you mean?
We've got a festival all through October about histories of Eastern that are running once a week with talks, theatre productions, etc., about ordinary working class people who are extraordinary people who lived in Bristol. So that's what we're doing this month.
Yeah, I follow the what I can that comes down from the Radical History group. Find it very interesting. It's on my doorstep, and it's great.
Fantastic.
That's interesting. Most of my family live in Bristol, all over, in Easton, St. Wayburgs, all over different parts of Bristol. That was our headquarters when we were growing up, because that's where my grandfather's sister lived, but she's buried in Northampton now. So Northampton is the headquarters for our family. And we've got a radical history group at the university where I'm doing my MA. So it'd be nice one day to, connect up with them. Yeah, it'd be nice to have you on giving a presentation, maybe when you've done your book.
That'd be great.
Okay? Is that okay?
Happy to be on various platforms when you've got the book published, and we look forward to reading that. Rosemary, thank you very much for your comment as well about the Duke of York was a sub-governor of the RAC. I think that's an interesting point as well. Ivor, I don't know if you're still there. No, perhaps not. Anyway, thank you so much.
I'm still here. I'm still here, Liz.
Are you okay, Ivor?
Yes, I'm okay. Just listening and learning.
Good. You're better informed about the problems we've got here in Australia. We've given
Yes,
ourselves.
yes.
Anyway,
Liz, just before you go to your bed, I know it's getting past your bedtime and you haven't had your cocoa yet, or your Milo, but tomorrow, Roland is up from London. He's in Liverpool. So we're meeting up tomorrow. We're attending a couple of fringe events prior to the Labour Party conference. So I don't know how we're going to split ourselves to join the meeting tomorrow. Our first fringe is at 12 something. Our second fringe is around 4 something. And to make it even worse, I have volunteered to help them with the fringe. So I'll be there all day.
All right. Okay. Well, don't worry at all. We just muddle through. I think one of the things that it's clear is that people are so busy with other things. If they're interested in Black history, they're so busy doing their own thing during Black History Month. It makes it difficult to keep going.
Absolutely.
So we'll do what we can then. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Carol. Thanks for joining us, Ivor. Lovely to see you again, June Smith-White. Dearie me, June Elizabeth White-Smith, Gully spelt with an E, and Freyog. Roland, it's lovely you join us, and we're always grateful to Simon for setting these things up. Okay then, lovely. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.